There we go. Let everybody in. All righty. Well, we have a nice sized group today. Um, I'd like to welcome you all to a Thursday morning learning session. It's uh, fun when we can get together and actually get credit in the CE department. And that is because Scott Childers, the director for the Southeast Library System, has uh, graciously agreed to talk to us about the Nebraska Open Meetings Act. That's what all of our library boards, public boards of all kinds. So that means the library boards have to abide by the Nebraska Open Meetings Act. And it last couple of years, there's been a few changes. Looks like there's a few more people in the waiting room, so we'll get everybody going here. Um, so there's been a few changes, and we want to make sure that everybody's up to date on this because it is an important law that our boards need to follow. So Scott, are you ready to go?
I
I think
am
so.
ready. I'm ready. So just as we go on, I will be taking breaks for questions. So feel free to, at those points, turn on your mic and ask, or go ahead and throw something in the chat as it strikes you. And Denise will help me keep track of those as we go along as well. Make sure I can actually move my slide. There we go. The disclaimer I will mention right now, I am not any of your legal counsel. I'm not your lawyer. And the information presented today should not be constructed as actual legal advice towards a pending or active legal case. The goal of today's presentation is to make sure you're aware that these legal requirements exist for boards. If you have an actual case pending or possible, contact your city attorney or other such legal professional. Can you tell I have a sibling in the legal profession? Just like Scott, give that disclaimer. With that out of the way, what is this? What is this that we're talking about? The Open Meetings Act is a set of state statutes that require public policy be done in a transparent and public manner. Best way to think about this is a law that benefits the citizens, right? There's a little bit of extra work that library boards, village boards, school boards, this board, that board have to do, but that makes sure that the people who live in those communities know what's going on, can learn, see what's being discussed, what was the decision, who made those decisions. They can be as informed as they want to be in that case. I did put in the sections of state statute that this is found. I also have links at the end of the slideshow for the full text of it, so you can double check my work. You don't have to take my word for it. As Denise was saying, library boards fall under this act. Almost all governmental councils, boards, and other groups must comply with Open Meetings Act, and that includes governing and advisory library boards. There was a question someone asked, well, I'm not accredited. Does that mean you still fall under this? Accreditation is a whole separate thing. It does not mandate or remove you from the Open Meetings Act. So you have to follow this, but also your city and village boards have to follow this. And there's another reason why you should learn this, is that way your village boards can't act in a way that leaves you behind. I've had some librarians that their village board got together and decided stuff for the library without an open meeting, without anybody being able to make comment. It just happened. And they should have been able to protest that and actually file suit, but that particular librarian I'm thinking of decided, nope, I'm just out, and left the state. So, but it does protect you the librarian, your staff, your board as well. Um, so let's keep that in mind. I will have a definition here. Public body is a term you'll hear me use every so often. That covers all these various councils and boards that have to follow the Open Meeting Act. So if you hear me say public body, I am referring to the board. Um, if there's confusion, because sometimes I talk about village and city council versus library board, and if those two get confused, it's probably my fault. And feel free to ask a question to clarify that. All right. So forgive me for quoting legislation in one big slide. I don't normally do this, but I did because it is new. This was passed in last year's legislative session, this change, and it took effect in January 1. And briefly, there are two options on advertising your meeting, which is a mandatory thing. You have to advertise your meeting. There are two options available for all libraries. If you are a library under five, serving a population under 5,000, there's a third one, and that's on the next slide. So for the majority of libraries, it's going to be the next slide that's more important. But I will say these are also options for you. And just to summarize this stuff, because I know it's a wall of text. First option, A, you publicize your meeting in the newspaper that's of general circulation in your community that actually will get printed before the meeting happens. Then there's a posting on that newspaper's website, if they have one, and a posting to a statewide repository of public notices, which is conveniently enough put together by a bunch of newspapers. This is new. This was inserted into another bill, so it is not the best written legislation. So I don't know if this makes sense or not, but if you have a newspaper that covers your area and that will get printed before your meeting, you need to have a notice in that. Then the newspaper should put it up on their website and put it in that repository. That's the newspaper's responsibility for those last two. Let's say you're in a community that does not have a newspaper that will be published in time for your meeting. I know in many communities, newspapers now come out weekly. I don't know, is there a bi-weekly one? I don't know if there is or not, but I know there's some that have cut way back in their publication dates.
Yeah.
For that, you would post a notice to the newspaper's website and post it to that repository. Those are the two options that cities over 5,000 have for posting this. One thing is, if you're that size, you probably have a newspaper and you probably have a city office that will help you get through that process. There's nothing in this law that says those notices must be free to the public board. So more than likely, it will be a paid advertisement or paid notice in the newspaper. In the case that a newspaper refuses to put that notice, then the public body has to put it up on their website and get it in that repository and post it publicly. So hopefully I made that clearer than the legal jargon that was in there. If you are 5,000 or smaller, you don't have to do either of those. You can just post a notice in 3 public places in your city or county or district, whoever funds you, and that notice will be posted in those same 3 places every time you have a meeting. So you can put one in the library bulletin board, the city building, and you can put it on a tavern window if you want to. You can put it on a telephone pole outside, just as long as it's the same 3 places every time you have a meeting. And there's more rules about what's in that notice. We'll get into that a little bit later. So any questions on this requirement? Again, this is a newer thing. It was kind of added at the last minute into another bill. I think it was on Veterans Affairs. So we haven't seen the results of this yet. We're just now obligated to do this. So I don't know if we've got anyone from the larger cities who have had experience with this new thing. Again, if you're under 5,000, which is going to be the bulk of you guys, you can ignore the newspaper stuff and just put it in 3 public places. If you want to put it in a newspaper, that's grand. But you can do one of these 3 and be covered. Let's take a break for questions on this.
I have a
And if,
question.
oh, good. Okay.
Okay, so we're over 5,000,
Okay.
but the newspapers are like tri-weekly or just once a week. Is the
Mhm.
city's website sufficient if we put it on there?
Okay. Um, you're over 5,000. So
Yeah,
you do fit that. Okay. So here's the thing, and we'll get into that later. You already have an obligation to put it on the city's website. It does
okay.
not count for the newspaper requirement.
So we
Is it,
still need it in the paper.
now, is it 3 times weekly or is it every 3 weeks?
It's 3 times weekly, Tuesday,
Okay.
Thursday, and Saturday.
Okay. We'll get into something else on the next slide, but that should still be enough time to get something in there, depending on their due dates, to get it into the newspaper. Otherwise, the newspaper's website, do they have one?
Yes, yes, they do.
Okay, so that would work too. That let me go back. So option B here would work in that case as well, because if they have a website, they can post it there if the newspaper won't get published in time, and
Okay.
then they'll put it in that depository. Does that clarify that?
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Yeah,
But
sure.
okay, so newspapers, Scott, we're pretty sure they don't do much of anything for free anymore.
Correct.
And did I hear you say that even if it's gonna cost, you have to do it
Yep.
if you're over 5,000?
Yep.
Okay.
There's nothing in state law that says the newspaper has to provide these to the public for free. So, and that was a big argument that some municipalities did. It's like, you're going to add this cost to our budget for every public meeting. The village board, the Parks and Rec board, the library board, school boards are going to have to do this too. But it passed. So,
Well, for any of you who don't have a microphone, feel free to type in the chat. I have it open and I will give Scott information about any questions that come in there. But if you want to unmute, go ahead and do that. The other thing is I am busily writing down everyone who I can tell is here. Some of the names on your computers are a little different, and so I don't have access to your full name. If you want credit for the CEs this morning, if you could send a chat with your name. If your name on your screen is, or you're somebody that I know, then don't worry about doing that. Or if you have more than one of you watching, if you've invited a board member or something, be sure and add that to the chat as well, because then everybody can get credit for it. And I see a message here, Scott. It's probably
okay.
just somebody giving me their name. Let me look here.
Yeah.
Let's see. Gotta get my. How do you find the statewide website to post on it?
Um, I will have to double check that because that is the newspaper's responsibility. Um, so that is something they
Oh,
should do.
and she may be asking about that statewide one where the newspapers are working together.
Yeah, I'll have to
A
dig
third
that
option.
up and I'll try to get that to you in the end here.
Okay. And we have a library that's over 5,000,
Okay.
and the city posts on a bulletin board, not a website. Does that need to change? And they
Yeah.
do buy an ad in the newspaper
And,
already
yeah.
because they're
And we'll
over
get into the
5,000.
website stuff here in another slide or two.
Okay. Okay. Well, those are the questions for you this
Yeah.
time around is finding that statewide website and if the city posted on a bulletin board, but not the website.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's go ahead and move forward because I think that will answer some of these questions then.
Okay.
Also in the law, is public must be given reasonable advance notice. And this kind of goes to that question I answered at the beginning is you have to let the public have enough time to actually know a meeting happens. Here's the thing, state statute does not say what reasonable advance notice is. It's just kind of there. Without any other type of model to go with in your community, I would suggest 10 days. Be thinking about that time frame. If your city already has a process like, okay, we're always doing it 1 week is the first posting, then try to follow that as closely because that's what the people who live there are used to. All the meetings are published like a week beforehand. But again, state statute does not say what reasonable advance notice is. I will also mention I've run across just a few, it's rare, but it happens, where it's actually in city ordinance when how long before a meeting their boards will post something. So you may want to double check that. It's rare. Okay, so I'm thinking most of you will not find it, but it could exist. Okay, the notice of that meeting shall be the time and place of that meeting, because people are invited, the agenda of the meeting, or a statement of where they can see the current up-to-date agenda. Okay. I used to stress the agenda being posted in full. Now with this newspaper requirement, your default should be agenda can be found at the library circulation desk. Instead of paying per word or character or whatever, you should just keep a copy where people can come up and say, what's the current agenda for your board meeting next week? Or even the newspaper ad just says, look at the library bulletin board. That would work. The agenda can be changed up to 24 hours before the meeting. So if your meeting is at 6 o'clock on a Thursday night, you can change that agenda up to 6 o'clock on the Wednesday night. After that, it is frozen. You do not change that agenda. Locations where and when you advertise this, put notices up, should be put in the meeting minutes. I've seen it works really well if it's a header. So advertisements of this meeting were posted here, here, and here, and advertised in this paper on this date. And then the actual like meeting call to order at 6:01, roll call, etc. One more question one more thing, and then we'll get back to questions. The agenda has to have enough detail so a citizen can understand what's being covered for that topic. My example here, an agenda item of getting books is not helpful. An agenda item, say, grant proposal to build up the financial literacy collection, that's about the level that you want, right? It's specifics, that way we know it's about building a special collection as opposed to getting books. Getting books could be, hey, the delivery guy can never get us our books because we're never here when the delivery happens. So we have to pick someone to go to the post office. And sometimes that's the post office down the road. Who's going to do it? And are we paying the mileage? That's also getting books. So think about that. The agenda, someone who's not in the day-to-day of the library should be able to still have a rough idea of what you're talking about on that agenda. There are questions about websites. Cities of the first class and larger shall place on their websites the agenda of the meeting no later than 24 hours before the start of that meeting. The agenda has to be available for at least 6 months. If you're under 5,000, you do not have that obligation. I had a question recently about someone who was in a smaller village. So how long do we have to keep it up? And it's like, you have no obligation under state law. If you're 5,000 or above, yes, you do. So hopefully that answers some of those questions we had about website. And we'll talk about minutes later too, because that's a whole other kettle of fish. But let's check in on those questions.
All righty. Well,
Yeah.
Krista's on board with us today, and she published in the chat from the Attorney General's Open Meetings Act page, the Nebraska Public Notices page, and she gives the website here. anypublicnotices.com. There's a www in front of it.
Mm,
And that is the statewide website established and maintained for those notices by the Nebraska newspapers.
yeah.
So Krista has it right here in the chat. Pull up the chat and I will make sure that that is available with the recording. But so that's good that Krista's here to do that for us. And that is from the Attorney General's Open Meetings Act page. Now, there's a question from up at Valentine. It says, our newspaper has meeting notices on their website under premium content. So if you go to their website, their newspaper's website, and look at the free stuff, you're not going to see this because it's under the premium content where you have to pay to get to it. So does that meet the requirement?
That Okay, so that for one thing, that's them being greedy so-and-sos. I'll be honest about that. I don't think there's anything in the law that prevents that. However, I do think that the citizens of Valentine certainly could make a big stink about it because that is, I mean, these are notices about what's going on in their town and they should have ready access to it. And especially if the city isn't doing physical posting elsewhere or on their website. I just see them. It's one of those, it certainly seems immoral, but not illegal. But that'd be something I would probably see if the city is even aware of that. And if so, the city attorney have an issue with it. It certainly seems to be going against the whole idea of open meetings, which is the people who live here need to have access of their government so they know what's going on in their lives. That is a great thing to bring up. Who was that from Valentine?
Carrie.
Carrie, thank you for bringing that up. That is one of those unintended consequences of a rushed piece of legislation.
This is
And
Krista. I
Chris,
have another view of that, I guess. I was just thinking about it as I was
sure.
reading through the actual act and everything. The act requires that it be published in a newspaper, and people have to pay to buy a newspaper, a paper newspaper. So would that fall into the same thing as you got to pay to buy a newspaper to see the notice?
I think that's covered under the fact that the website, forgive two policy people arguing about this online.
Well, no, I think it's a great question too. Nobody's ever asked it, and
is.
I'm wondering too, is that right? Is that wrong? Should it be public and freely available to the public? And also just, for ethics reasons, I think it's a bad thing to hide those public notices behind a paywall.
Yeah, there's the printed in the newspaper, so that's the paid. And then the website is supposed to be the free access along with that state.
For people that don't have
Christopher.
access to, who don't pay for a newspaper, right? Okay.
Yeah. So
well, and the library pays for a newspaper, so anybody who doesn't want to buy a newspaper can still look at it. But if you log on to the library's computer, you're still can't
going to
read
be
it
blocked.
that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. And thank you, Krista, for putting in the public notices page in the chat.
I knew I had seen it somewhere when we had done this. We've done webinars ourselves about this before. I'm like, I know it's somewhere. Let me see if I can find it while we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I got a couple more questions for you, Scott. Let's see if we can stump the presenter here. Do cities under 5,000 need to finalize and share the agenda 24 hours prior to the meeting as well? So finalize the agenda that you keep at your CERC desk. Does it have in cities under 5,000?
Okay, so that agenda has to be shared. It can be a work in progress throughout the time it's posted, but it does need to be finished 24 hours beforehand, no matter the size of your community.
Okay, that was the question.
You could post it a week before and then, we need to add something. You could change that posting as long as it's not changing after 24 hours before the meeting. But you can start with the posting and then add stuff as you go through that time beforehand.
Okay, and the size of the city, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's
Right.
always 24 hours before.
Yep. For all sizes, that is true for all sizes.
Okay, so this is a couple of questions in this same text.
Okay.
Um, so both, they're clarifying in their head, both the agenda and the meeting notice have to be posted on the city website, not
Uh,
just have the physical copies. It
so
has to
on
be
the
on the
city,
website.
um, on the city website, yeah, the agenda will count as the notice in that part if it's structured right. If you put, here's the agenda for the meeting that will be held on this day in this place. So that one thing can act as both. For those that have to put it on the city, that would be my interpretation of it. Um,
Okay,
so,
and then
So
do,
Denise, that's my question. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
yeah,
So what I was trying to make sure I was catching all the wording in your previous slides.
yeah.
We do pay for an ad that goes
Okay.
out the Friday before the Wednesday meeting. Then we also notify in 3 different spots, and the city itself posts a physical copy on their bulletin board. I don't believe it goes onto their webpage. So
Okay.
that I'm making that distinction, physical versus virtual.
Okay.
And then I don't remember hearing about the agenda needing to be on the city site, because that's never happened. So we'll have to obviously change.
Yeah.
So I was just clarifying the physical bulletin board versus their city website. And do meeting notices have to be maintained for the same 6 months that the agendas do on the website?
Yeah. It is agendas that need to be kept for that archival 6 months. And yeah, this website thing with the 6 months, 24 hours for the cities above 5,000, that's a relatively new change too. I think that's only 2 years old. So the past 5 years have seen some sort of change every unicameral. I thought last year they didn't have any, but then they snuck in 2 changes as amendments to a Veterans Affair bill and a Tribal Regalia Affair bill. So, uh,
and I didn't know if you recognized her voice or not, Scott, but
yeah,
that
that's
was Donna
Donna.
Cruz. Yeah, okay, I just wanted to let you know that.
Yeah.
Krista did have to jump off for another meeting, and she wants everybody to know that if you still need an Open Meetings Act poster, she has them available to mail to you. Just send Krista Porter an email and she will put one in the mail to you so that you have a current and up-to-date poster. Okay, and then there's no more questions.
All right. So I'm going to kind of speed through a couple of sections here and mention that things exist. If you have questions on them, we can go back, or you can contact any of the regional library directors, library system directors, or Krista, and we can. But I'm going to get to another big meaty part of this. Get my cursor working here. Okay, I do want to mention there is a thing for emergency meetings and there is a thing for special meetings. Special meetings are one topic meetings outside your usual schedule of board meetings. They still follow all the same rules as a regular meetings. Emergency meetings are, we have to decide this like tomorrow or today. You can have an emergency meeting with no advertising. It's still a single thing. It's anything for that emergency, but it better be an actual emergency. Because if not, then you'll be looking at using the laws to get around transparency, and the Attorney General doesn't like that. So those things exist. There's the regular meetings, special meetings, and emergency meetings. I'm going to go on to the next thing and won't dwell on this. Just wanted to let you know that those 3 things exist, and they have those terms. Special and emergency are 2 different things. Virtual meetings, you could do that, but you can't vote in a virtual meeting, and you still need to have one of the board members in a physical location during the meeting And the library staff doesn't count. It has to be a library board meeting. This is another one of these. This got introduced a couple of years ago, shortly after the pandemic. I'm going to go ahead and move forward, and we can come back to virtual meetings if there's questions. I want to get to this part here, public's rights. So the people who live there, they have the right to attend these meetings, to record these meetings, to broadcast these meetings, to make notes and make comments, right? So if someone wanted to go to the village board meeting and record the whole thing on audio tape, that is their right. They can do so. It's the section of state law is that number up there at the top, that 84-14-12. New in 2024, the public shall have an opportunity to speak at every meeting of the public body. This is a change. It used to be that the public body could say, no public comments today. We've got a full agenda. Public comments will come back to next meeting. Every meeting has to have a time where the public can make a comment. A lot of the libraries that are doing this, they just have a set thing on their agenda, public comment. They also set a time limit for each comment, 3 minutes tops. So that way everyone can have a chance to share if they want to. I do want to mention something about the public comment. This is, like the term says, comment. It is not an invitation to debate. It's not a question and answer. It is not a, hey, you guys need to vote on this other thing that's not on your agenda today. The best thing for your board members to do is sit, absorb the content that is being presented to them. Thank you for your comment, and next person, please. You know, it is not the time to debate. It is definitely not the time to vote on anything. It is comments from the public. And there is no mandate that you have to act on any of the comments. Because we know there are some people who believe that the frogs are talking to them, and they say that we need to build a palace out of corn husks in the square. I don't know if you've ever heard that one, but that one was a doozy. So we know that some of those people live in our communities. Let them talk, and then thank you and move on. Regarding that, and then we'll pause for questions after this. A public body cannot require that a person identify themselves simply to attend the meeting. There is no guest book for a public meeting. You just show up and sit down in the audience, okay? There is no requirement for an individual to be on the agenda prior to the meeting to make comment on something on the agenda. That public comment time could be anything, stuff that's on the agenda, stuff that isn't. Again, you're not acting on the comment. It's just them speaking to power and said, this is what I think. There are some that say, in the past, I would say, oh, that's an agenda item, you can't talk. For some, they had some twisted logic that couldn't happen during public comment. That's not right. That's not in the state statute. The public body can require someone to disclose name and address when they make their comment. Okay, the address, it can be withheld if it's to protect the commenter. Let's say there's a protection order, they don't want to give their address in public record. That person should make additional talk with like the clerk or something and let them know there's a police order protecting me, and so my address can't be made public and all of that. Why would you require that? Well, first, they have to have a name, and some people, if their real name is out, they won't talk smack. They'll be a little bit more civil. That's good. And the address lets the public body know that this person is actually one of the people in their community. It's not some wandering person who just wants to stir up trouble on their way through the county, which has happened. Okay, and again, the public comment time is just talk. It is not a mandate to do anything. So, you know, there are some people who feel, especially if the presenter is very emotional and powerful in their speech, but again, it's just comment. You're not going to vote on anything. You might put it on the agenda for next meeting. Okay. Let's see here. I think I said, yeah, okay. I want to finish this public rights thing. You need a copy of that Open Meetings Act. Krista mentioned those posters. If you don't have a poster, you could print out a bunch of stuff and plaster it up onto a bulletin board or something. The key thing is it has to be accessible by the audience anytime during that meeting. They can get up off their seat and walk to it and look at it anytime during that meeting. So posting it behind like the chairman of the board, no, that's not going to work unless you don't mind wandering, people wandering up and just staring at the poster while you're trying to hold a meeting. This is that way the people can see what their rights are anytime during that meeting. And if they want to, say, hey, point of privilege, or they can plan their lawsuit or whatever. This posting is for the audience, not the members of the board. Okay, time for questions, if there are any.
Oh, I'm not seeing any just now, but I'm glad to know, Scott, that it reminds me to say, just listen. You don't debate, and you just take it in and say, thank you for your comment. Because I forget to say that sometimes. So that's a good reminder for me. And I was interested in throwing it out on the table doesn't count. You have to actually put it up somewhere
It has to be
before the meeting.
has to be kind of like a semi-permanent type of thing. So someone couldn't gather it up and walk out the door during the meeting with it.
Huh. Okay.
I know in the past, there's in the slide, there's a little bit more explanation. In the past, we used to use that, but there was a court case that said, no, that doesn't count because it could be easily removed. And so that's key. Can it be easily removed? So putting it on like thick poster board on an easel with maybe like a chain, one of those light chains or like those little ball chains that you see at banks for their pens, it's going to take some effort to remove that, but that would count because it would be very obvious someone was trying to take it out of the room during a meeting. Location will also play a matter. If it's with, where everyone can see where it's hung up, then people aren't going to go up to the bulletin board and start removing pieces of paper during the meeting without someone noticing. So that's the key with that court case that happened, I think at this point, maybe 6 years ago. I'd have to double check. But it does have to be something that won't easily be removed during a meeting.
Okay. Well, that was just another interesting fact for me, but no, I don't see any more questions, Scott.
Okay. Okay, let's talk minutes, another very important part of the Open Meeting Act. This is the documentation of the meeting for those who could not attend. It shall include the time and place of the meeting, the members present and absent. So you list present and absent, and the substance of all matters discussed. I know some meeting minutes will include guests. That's your choice if you want to. Librarian is usually a good one because it's usually part of their job to attend. And then you can show proof that, yeah, that librarian was here for every board meeting, or that librarian was never here for the board meeting. We have to have a discussion with them. But yeah, you're not under obligation to record everyone who attended in that, just the members, whether they were there or the members who were not. Also in the minutes, and this is also kind of procedural, any vote will be done by roll call with each member's vote recorded in the minutes. I don't know if you've ever been in a village board meeting where they run through Bob, aye, Jake, aye, Susan, aye. That's how it should be done. Every board member does a vote on roll call. So you can't do a unanimous thing in the minutes. Every vote has to be recorded too. This is something that will be a big change for many of us because we've never done it. In most things, it's usually voting by consensus as opposed to actual raising of hands or verbal. A bunch of people nodding, yep, okay. But this is in state statute that the votes will be done by roll call and they will be recorded individually. Again, so the citizens will know, okay, of these people who have been appointed to run our library, the people who've been elected to run our city, this is how they vote. And so now I can have an informed opinion whether I want to ask them to come back vote for them again, make a case for or against them, support them if they're going up again, those type of things. Okay. Minutes and all documentation received or disclosed will be available for public within 10 days. This is the minutes as a draft. You do not wait until they've been approved. You have 10 days to get minutes out to the public. You can certainly make changes at the next business meeting, and those will show up in those minutes, but there has to be a copy of the minutes available within 10 days of the meeting. If you're smaller than 5,000, you have another 10 days if the person in charge gets sick, because they realize that person may not even have a backup because it's a smaller community. I do want to touch on this and all documentation. In my time, I've seen 3 different interpretations. One is the one I prefer, and I think a lot of them do, is any handouts are attached to the actual minutes and kept as kind of a packet. So if the director puts out a handout full of the stats, that handout, a copy of that handout is included in with the minutes. I prefer that because the context of the actual document sometimes makes a difference. And plus it's easier. Here are the minutes and here's all the handouts from that meeting. And it all goes in. And if someone asks for the minutes, they get that whole packet. Second one I've seen is those handouts are transcribed into the minutes. I think that loses the context of the actual document. You don't see all the pictures that may be important, and plus it introduces room for errors. But there are some communities, that's how they do it. That's how the city told them to do it. And then there are a few, and those communities, I disagree with their city attorneys on a lot of their interpretations of this law. And they are the only ones who seem to have this thing. Those handouts don't count. It's just the minutes. Again, that is a rather unique interpretation, and most of the neighboring communities don't have that one. It's either one of the first 2. And then talking about those cities of the first class, larger, your minutes are also on the website no later than 10 days, and those minutes shall stay on the website for at least 6 months. Again, those website things are new. I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 years ago. But so that's relatively new. So I can understand if some of the communities haven't been doing that yet, but it is a requirement now. Yeah, let's stop for questions on minutes, because I think that this might be a place where we might have more questions.
Okay, we do have a couple of questions. One is, how current does your poster need to be?
Oh, okay. It needs to be up to date with the latest bills passed by unicameral. So the end of the unicameral last year, so everything that was going to take effect for all of 2024 would have been passed by the end of the unicameral, because they write their bills active January 1 or active immediately or something like that. That's part of the bill that's written. So if your poster is current as of the last day of legislature, if it includes those, it'll be good. Currently in the unicameral, I don't see any bills to change the Open Meeting Act. But again, I said that last year. I was surprised with 2 major changes coming in the last days as amendments into other bills.
And so if you don't have the poster from Krista most recently, you'll want to send her an email, Krista Porter at the Nebraska Library Commission, because they made some changes. So if you don't have that one, we'll have to it's probably dated 2024.
It'll be dated 2024, and probably would that be May? We had a short session last year, so it'd probably be somewhere around that May date, May 2024.
Okay.
They only publish them once a year, so.
Yeah, so I would order from Krista. All right. So we're getting some questions here, Scott.
Good.
Okay,
Good.
so when the voting happens, this is referring to roll call voting.
Gotcha.
So can the voting say, and I'm guessing that means in the minute, all voted yes in, or do you put
Um,
each person's name and put a yes after it?
you would put in a person name in the actual vote, even if it's unanimous. Now you could use shorthand, like instead of doing the full name, like if there's only one Childers on the board at that time, you could say Childers voted. Or if there's only one Scott, Scott voted. If there's only one Denise, you could put Denise
Yeah.
or Harders or initials. Just that way people can look up at the top where you list the board members and match it to whatever notation you use. But it does have to be, even though it's unanimous, name, vote, name, vote, name, vote. Because someone could be abstain.
Okay.
And unanimous of voting is not unanimous of the whole board. And so you need to put abstain in
Okay.
those cases. So
So that one, it can't, so all, any kind of conglomeration of that is not allowed.
that's my understanding of it. Yeah.
Okay, so now where do the towns under 5,000 need to post their minutes?
They don't. They do. You have no obligation to post if you're under 5,000. You do have an obligation to have them available upon request. And that place should be known. It's either the city hall or the library. If it's the library board, it's going to be, they're either going to go to city hall or library first. And you can have copies of both if you want, if that's a thing. Or,
But there's no stipulation to post it.
right. If you're under 5,000, there is no mandate currently to post them online. It's a great idea. And it shows an openness of what you're doing. It's like, we have nothing to hide. Here you go, world. But we know it's not always feasible, right? And some of the website software that some of our communities use, it's actually a big pain to post a document. If you're not editing something in their little templates, it can be hard. I've used some. It's not the greatest. So yeah, if you're under 5,000, at least and be consistent where it's kept. But if someone wants a copy, you can say, "Yep, here we go." And you can even do print on demand, as long as they can walk away with a copy if they wanted to. So you could have it in a, Word document or PDF. You say, "Oh, let me print off a copy for you." Print it off, and there you go. So
Okay. So then, okay, so this is talking about, the question here is about all the attending information. So you've got your minutes and all the stuff. So the question is, what if there is quote information that has been distributed to the board?
what was that?
What if there is, like, if you are accepting bids for a big
Oh,
project,
okay.
so what if there is quote and bid collection time, and the bid collection time is still open?
Oh,
That's the struggle is, so do you include, these are the quotes we've received and we have till the end of the month?
that is a great question, especially that little wrinkle where the bid is still open. Now the question is, would they be looking at those bids before the bid is closed? They probably shouldn't be. It should not be introduced to the board at that point, but that's neither here nor there. Sometimes stuff happens.
Right.
I think you could certainly put in, and again, this would be something you want to talk with the city attorney about, just to be sure, because they would be the ones to defend whatever you choose to do. But I think you would be able to say, put in some notation like bids were, because you wouldn't be passing those bids out to the audience either.
It wasn't the bid itself. I didn't
Okay.
rephrase that well. It was, I guess from the engineer firm said it should, their estimate of costs.
Okay.
And so that is financial information we normally wouldn't share to the community, because then people bid and have advantage if they've read it or heard it or seen it.
Yeah. And that actually leads into the closed meeting section that now beginning into next. So that's a great question, Donna. I would check with the city attorney how to handle that type of information, what works best for the city. There are some that will say information was received in the minutes, information was received on bids. We're keeping that under wraps till after the bidding is done. So it's not distributed, but it's still there for future reference after the bid. That's a way to handle it. Others just like, well, we'll just reintroduce that document at the end of the process, included in the post approval minutes or whatever. But yeah, something like that, I would check with the city attorney how they would handle it. I'm assuming the city itself has probably dealt with that more often than the library board has. And so they might have a procedure already in place. Does that help you, Donna?
They do their financial stuff in closed session, so I guess
Okay. Okay.
no minutes or no notes are taken about those types of things. So
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And we'll talk
Okay.
more about closed session here in the next slide. So it's a great segue. What other
Okay, well,
questions
I
do we
have
have?
a couple questions here. What notice, if any, has to be made if no meeting is being held due to lack of quorum or for inclement weather?
Okay. Well, of course, as soon as possible, but for either of those could happen later than 24 hours. If at all possible, making that decision before 24 hours before the meeting would be grand, and then putting up posts wherever you had posting, and then on the door of the meeting room. Sometimes that just you can't have a good timing for that, and you just do your best to let people know that there won't be a meeting. Because
You can put it up on your library's webpage even.
yeah,
Say no meeting this evening due to the miserable weather.
yeah. And no one asks about Facebook or social media in general. Those do not count as any of the previous posting things I mentioned.
Okay.
So if it says website, it means an actual website. It does not count if it's your Facebook page or any social media. Those are all secondary. Those are great ideas for getting the word out. And the meeting is canceled, Facebook or Blue Sky or
Right.
whatever. If you got the time, an Instagram post with a lot of snow in front of a door, why not? So yeah, in case of a emergency, you're just not meeting. If it's not quorum, I mean, you could still have the meeting. You just can't vote on anything. You could still discuss things, but then you'd have to, go back and at the next one to actually vote on. So that'll be your decision if you actually cancel the meeting because of lack of quorum or not. And sometimes it would be actually a good time to catch up on CE. It's like, we can't vote on anything, so we're going to sit here and watch this video on something and get our board CE. But yeah, inclement weather or any close, like, hey, the building's air conditioning went out and we're not sitting there in 80-degree outside, 100-degree inside. We've moved it to here, or we're canceling it, or we're postponing it.
But then you can put that on social.
Yeah. There's nothing in state statute about handling that situation. I'll put it that way.
Okay. I had one more, and it runs real closely with Donna's question about
Okay.
minutes. This librarian includes all financial documents for each month at her board meeting in with the board's packet. And so the question is, she needs to include all of the financial documents when posting the minutes, and she's small enough. It's a small enough place that you don't actually post it anyway. But do those financial documents have to stay with the minutes?
Here's the question: if it's all like city or village money, that stuff is already public record. That stuff, someone can go in and get any financial information about any of our libraries if they wanted to, if they go to City Hall. Not the foundations or friends. Let's make that clear. But that type of documentation is already a public record. It's just a lot of people never bother to look for it. So if you're talking about that, people can find it if they wanted to and ask for it if they wanted to anyway. If it's a foundation or friends, that's a whole other kettle of fish. And so let's get some
And that's
clarification.
not open meeting because that's a private foundation.
Right.
Okay.
So,
So yeah, I guess, but if it's if it's a board packet, that's what you put together.
yeah. Like I said, people could go to the city and ask for the city budget anytime they want to. They should be able to get a copy of it within a day. That's their right as a citizen. Most people don't, because who wants to stare at a whole bunch of accounting if you don't have to?
Right.
I worked at UNL and they published all of our salaries in big books. So if someone wanted to know how much I earned, they got upset with me at the reference desk. Like, how much do you earn? I just say, I'll help you find that. We can look it up together. And yeah, I was a bit of a smart aleck back when I was younger.
Yeah.
So again, it's city funding or township funding or county funding. It's already public, not like widely distributed, but the public can access it.
Okay. All righty. Well, that was the last of our questions there.
Okay, let's move to a closed session, kind of building off of what Donna was talking about. You can have a closed session in your meeting. Those meetings can be closed for only a few reasons. Let's go over them. Strategy sessions in respect to collective bargaining, real estate purchases, pending or active litigation. We're talking about bids. That's a great example, because you don't want, here's what we think our cost will be, and then open up bids. They're all going to go look at your open meeting minutes and go, well, here's the cost that we're going to put down so we can get the bid. It actually harms the taxpayers because it doesn't give the city room to negotiate anything. And so we're always paying more than we probably should if that information is out there. So yeah, that type of financial information, those upcoming purchases, definitely can be closed, and without the documentation like Donna was talking about, that type of stuff can be withheld in those situations. Discussion of security, if that stuff's public, it's just theater at that point. It's not effective security. So you can close the session to talk about where you're putting the cameras, or if you're hiring guards, or we're putting these new speed bumps in the parking lot with spikes, which would be a bad idea, but it's a free country. Investigations of potential criminal misconduct. Again, you don't want those investigations to be public right away, because people will manufacture alibis, destroy evidence, all of that. And also job performance can be a closed session if they want to protect that person from needless injury to their reputation. And also if that person in question has not requested it be done in public. And there are times where, even though it might be a negative evaluation, you may want to be made public because you feel like the evaluators are biased. And so by making it public, it reveals their bias, and sometimes it forces the other people on that board to either publicly support that or publicly go against that. I mean, most of us know that sometimes boards are usually run by one or two loudmouths. Having it be public kind of forces people out of their shell sometimes. I had a librarian that made hers public, and actually the chair of that village board ended up losing the next election because people saw how much of a tyrant he was towards the librarian and the other people who worked for the village. So other types of boards may have other eligible reasons, not library boards and not village boards. So those are the only reasons you can go into closed session. I'll talk about what you need to do, and then we'll open for questions again. So for a closed session, it's a session within an open meeting. It is not a meeting in and of itself. Something to remember. Even if you're a special meeting and you're going to be under closed, all of it, you still open like you start the meeting like an open meeting. You still advertise like an open meeting. When it's time to go into that agenda item, there is a vote to go into that closed session, and it's said why you're going in. We're going into a closed session to discuss bids for this. We're going into a closed session to discuss security. All those in favor, aye. You go into closed session. The audience is asked to leave or the board goes to another room. They talk, they discuss, they review whatever they need to do. They come back. Both parties are now back together, audience and board. They reopen the meeting and then they vote. They don't do any voting in closed session. There's no decisions done in that. It's done in the public with the roll call vote like normal. Okay. This is where I see a lot of things go awry. I've seen librarians report they had this private closed meeting that no one knew about, but apparently it was the library board and the city board, and I didn't know about it until 3 days later. Yeah, that's wrong. That's illegal. So if someone wanders into the room, if you're having a special closed session, they're still allowed to be there for the open meeting part, even if it wasn't, if it was illegally not advertised. But again, closed sessions is a small area of things that can be done in closed session. Everything else needs to be out in the public. And again, the vote has to be public too. I've seen some where the vote is in the closed session. Well, that doesn't go with the whole reason we have this, where people can see what the people in charge are doing and deciding. Questions?
Well, I don't see any in the chat. You guys can always unmute yourself and ask Scott a question. So just because it's something that might be unpopular, you can't vote behind the closed session.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I do want to mention one thing. That's a great point, Denise. You cannot go into closed session to protect the reputation of the board members. Some will try to do that because there's an unpopular board member or they did an unpopular thing. You cannot go into closed session to protect a board member. They're all open in open meeting. To protect the reputation of an employee, yes. But a board member, nope, you can't go into closed session to protect their reputation. If they screwed up, it's got to be publicly mentioned. So sorry to cut you off, Denise.
No, that's good. But nope, I don't see anything typed in right now. So I guess we're ready to keep going.
All right, people are running out of coffee. So let's talk about social events. And this is one that when I first started public libraries, I was told one thing, and I found out it's not that thing at all. So I don't know what your experience is, but there is actually a statement in state law that allows a quorum of members to get together in functions. And I'm going to read the quote here for once. The act does not apply to chance meetings or to attendance at or travel to conventions or workshops of members of a public body at which there is no meeting of the body then intentionally convened if there is no vote or other action taken regarding any matter over which the public body has supervision, control, jurisdiction, or advisory power. So I know in some of our smaller communities, you can't go to a basketball game without the school board and the library board and half of the county commissioners all being in the same building. Now, I grew up in a village of 350 people. There's not that many people, but those ball games were packed. So that's okay. It happens. People live in the communities that they serve. So of course we're going to have run-ins and social events, and it's okay as long as you're not actively doing business that board should do. That said, I do hear a lot of city clerks and stuff suggest your board members should try to avoid congregating together because it may look like they're acting outside of a public meeting. I've heard that advice, especially at, let's say, a library friends or foundation event. Of course, the board members would probably attend, but people may get the idea that, well, they're actually having a little meeting off in the corner. That's public perception. And, if people are going to be paranoid, they're going to be paranoid no matter what. If you want to try to take steps, just like, okay, we're just going to sit in groups of 2 over here just to prevent, paranoid Pete from saying anything, that's your call. but you can't all go to graduation. You can't all go to the ball games. You can't all go to, you know, you can all be on the same float in the parade if you still have floats in your parades. That's fine. So let's talk about consequences if you violate any of these, and then I'll pause for a lot of questions here. If you think there has been a failure to follow Open Meetings Act, the Attorney General or the county attorney are the people you will report it to. The consequences of having a meeting that doesn't follow Open Meeting Act could, well, for one, anything decided in that meeting could be voided. So if you're hiring a new librarian or library staff and it goes through that meeting, well, that employment could be said, no, you don't really have a job. If you're buying or signing a contract, so no, that contract is now voided. All sorts of things. You set a new policy, so no, that policy has no effect because it was done in a meeting without open meeting. All of that is gone. Now, all of those would have to be with a suit, right? Someone would sue this. We're suing that they failed to operate under Open Meeting Act and therefore did this decision, and we want that decision nullified. And so that is possible. Also, it's not in here, but the judge could say, not only is that decision nullified, you can't go back and use the same process, and that person that had the contract is no longer eligible. You have to start all over, and that person cannot be part of the process that who you originally suggested. They can decide that for you. Also, on an individual matter, you could get found guilty of a class 4 misdemeanor for a first offense and class 3 misdemeanor for a second and subsequent offense, which means a fine of roughly $500 and possible jail time if it's a bad enough consequence. I've also seen here in the state, there have been public officials that they get put up to be recalled because they have repeatedly violated Open Meeting Act, whether they did it knowingly or not, but that is why some people have put them up for recall. It's like they are constantly working around the board outside of meetings and such things. So there are consequences. Much, Chapter 51, we don't have a lot of bite. In this, there is organizational and personal consequences. So I'll just wrap. These are some links. The first is a link to Open Meeting Act. If you've looked at Nebraska legislature, that'll get you to the first section, and then you just hit next to see all of it. The second is the entire text. It's very small print, but it's all there. And then Krista mentioned Attorney General's notes about Open Meeting Act. That's that third link. You can see all of his things. Just a reminder, the Attorney General does not set law, but he is one of those that will be actively prosecuting or defending this law. So his interpretations do have a little bit of weight, but it is not law itself. All right, let's see whatever other questions we have for whatever time we have left. I have run long, I'm sorry, but if there's people still online, I'll answer questions.
Oh yeah, we've got folks. I don't see any questions in the chat, but anybody that wants to is welcome to type that in or unmute and talk to Scott yourself. But yeah, we're just a few minutes long, and I thought it might be 15 or so, 20 minutes long anyway. So that's yeah. Well, those again, Scott, I appreciate you coming and doing this for us because the details of it are where you get kind of wonky. Let's see. We got one that goes back to the beginning of the presentation.
Okay.
Okay. So it's a small community, under 5,000.
Okay.
We post our monthly meeting notice in the paper each month. Our paper does not have a website.
Okay.
So is it their job to then post on that larger website, or just making sure she's doing it right? If you post it in the paper, it doesn't. Well, and you're not big enough. I'll let you answer, Scott.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track, Denise. It is, as far as what I understand that new section of law to be, it is the newspaper's responsibility to add that to that statewide repository. Your obligation is done after you've got it to the newspaper, and that's my understanding of that section of law. Again, that was just passed last unicameral session. It just went into effect in January. So right now we're still working through what this actually means now that it's law. I would not be surprised if we see some changes next year, because there are all these little questions and it's not clear. And all these small newspapers who may not have access to that conglomeration state policy yet, and maybe they're not allowed to by the people in charge of that. I don't know. There's unfortunately a lot of the newer things with this law are open to interpretation until there's an actual court case to settle it. So
we just do the best we can
yeah,
and in good faith and do what we know, which is why these sessions are so important.
yeah. We keeping in mind, we are trying to make things available to our citizens, our patrons. So
Err on the side of that.
Yeah.
Yes. On the side of making the citizens aware of what's going on. Getting
Yeah.
lots of thank yous. So looks like, unless somebody has a question, we'll be wrapping up here.
And thank you all for your time. I put my information in here. Of course, you can contact your regional library assistant director. Denise is here. Tammy is she on her way to DC, or did she make it? I forgot what you said, Denise.
Well, it was yesterday, so I hope she made it. Tammy was on the way to Washington, D.C. to talk to folks about library funding.
Yeah.
And
so feel free to contact any of us. And of course, Krista Porter at the commission. So
yeah, so I will be turning in everybody, and I think everybody who I wasn't sure who they were identified themselves, so we're good. I'll send all that stuff in for an hour. Oh, and Kim Ost is there with, okay. Thank you.
Denise, did you want a copy of my slideshow? If people
Yeah,
want
if that'd be okay if you want to send that along, and I'll post it because I'm going to put this will be posted on our YouTube channel. So I have a spot where I can put the slides, Scott. So that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll make sure you have access to these as well.
Okay. That will be great. So I put both Kim and Macy down. So yeah, we're good. All righty. Well, we'll see you all again soon. And thanks again, Scott. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.